Hey, this is Henry Sanders back with another episode of Real Talk. We want to thank our sponsors at Park Bank. Thank you for everything you're doing, sticking out this year. Thank you to Facebook Journalism Project. Thank you for supporting us in this tough time. We thank you for your support. Well, so today we have two wonderful women, powerhouse women, people who are leading our city, which actually makes Madison, I need to say this, makes Madison very unique in a lot of areas. Madison has a lot of women that are leading, and a lot of women of color who are leading. So we're kind of a unique city. So we have two wonderful women here who are going to talk today about the big referendum that's come up in the city of Madison. And let me start with Sandy Morales from Big Brothers and Big Sisters. How are you?
Doing quite great, thank you.
I just saw you like last week for our summit. Like
I know.
Coming Zoom buddies. Like
yeah.
And then Alderwoman Sheri Carter, she's a South Sider. I'm a North Sider. It's okay. I'm going to let that slide. I'm going to let it slide this time.
Oh, thank you very much, Henry.
And she's also the council president for the city of Madison. So welcome, Alderwoman Carter.
Thank you.
So, this referendum is a big deal. And, why are you two out here talking about the referendum? You're not on the school board. So why is this important to you, Sandy, being part of Big Brothers and Big Sisters? And I'll come to you, Alderwoman, and why is it important to you also for being on the city council?
Sure. This is very important for our children and youth. At Big Brothers Big Sisters, we serve the majority of the students that we serve come from Madison schools. And not only that, we do have a very strong partnership with MMSD, with our school-based mentoring program. And that is something that those kinds of partnerships are what I think our families really value. And so it's important that alongside mentoring programs that we provide, and I know that there's other nonprofit organizations that partner with our Madison schools. I think a lot of these investments are what really add value to our students' education, their experience. That coupled with organizations like ours that provide mentoring really provide that social, emotional, and academic supports that our students need. So yeah, I think this is a really important referendum. It's a big decision, but I feel like the investment that we're making is definitely going to pay off, not just for the students, but for the teachers as well. So yeah, I'm all for investing in our children and youth.
And same question to you, Alderwoman Carter.
Yes, well, I think the investment is critical. I think that we need to make sure that our schools have the technology that our children are going to be using once they graduate. And I think that we have to look at the age of our schools too, compared to the surrounding towns and cities that are getting new schools with the different work group learning, and then also the technology. And then dialing it back a little bit, I think that we also need to invest in some of the arts programs that kids find so beneficial.
Yeah, and you mentioned schools being older. I went to Madison East, right? So that's an old school, and it's like a castle, but it's old, and even West is old, and La Follette seems like one of the newer ones, but Memorial, I mean, they're all really compared to some Prairie or Wanakee or Verona. The schools really do seem outdated, and it kind of stands out more in COVID-19, right? Because you want to get kids back in school, and you want to make sure that they have everything that they need, and the environment, they can, the ventilation, all that stuff is really going to be a bigger issue right now, right? But let me read you a question that we have that someone wrote an op-ed on one of our about this, and then the question came back, and I think this is what you'll get a lot, right? Especially with the achievement gaps and things we have. Why should we invest more money in the school district that is failing students of color? So who wants to answer that question?
Well, I can certainly start. Actually, the investments that are being made are targeted to address some of these inequities that we're seeing specific to our students of color. And one thing I do want to make sure everyone knows is, and one of the reasons why I feel this referendum is important is, some of the ideas, the initiatives that are being put forth for investment came from the community. So they directly came from our families, many families of color. So I do feel like the work that was put in to prepare these initiatives comes directly from the voice of our families, many families of color. So I do feel like we are being responsive to those needs because these initiatives do exactly address the inequities that our students face. For example, the all day 4K, that's one of the things that we know is that age 0 to 3 is one of the most critical times in a child's life. That's where they really absorb those early learning skills, and but it's also an area where if they don't have those skills, that does not set them up for success. And that's where we start seeing those achievement gaps. And so one of the things that we see in the referendum is that all day 4K, which will really allow for our early learners to continue learning some of those skills that they began learning in their 0 to 3 years, or be able to catch up and address some of those gaps that we don't want to see in the future, and we don't want to see in literacy and math scores, especially. So I do feel that this is being responsive to our families of color that have said, this is what's important to them.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I just want to chime in because I also think that not only did we get feedback from those communities affected the most, but we also want to look at how we can prepare these children from going from elementary to middle school to high school and prepare them ultimately for the workforce. And we have to do the investment. We can do it now or we can do it later, but now is the right time for later.
Alderwoman, as you know, I know you know some of the people on that Black Leadership Council we have here in Madison. They have the Black Political Action Coalition, I believe, and they actually wrote a op-ed against the referendum, stating that that they haven't seen the return on investment for kids of color, especially Black kids, when it's addressing the achievement gap, and they didn't see anything at that point that gave them the confidence that this would actually help kids of color and really address that achievement gap. So I'm just bringing this up because you brought about you talk to people from the community, but there's also some Black leadership in the community who are against it. How do you answer their questions and their concerns right now? And I'll start with you, Alderwoman Carter.
Yeah, well, I think that two things that we have to look at. I think that education is so critical and has always been critical for the African American community to get ahead. And I think that this is one of the things that we are really looking at in this referendum is to really put in place those steps that will shrink the achievement gap. And that is what it's all about. And it's not just about the schools. I think that we all have to invest in our kids, whether you have children in the school system now or your children have already graduated. I think that by mentoring, by volunteering, all these things affect how children develop, excuse me.
And Sandy, do you want to answer that question too? Like, how, for the people who are concerned about the referendum and who are really focused on saying, look, we get that the schools need upgrading, but we don't want to spend any more money in the school district because the school has failed our children for decades. How is this going to be a direct impact on our kids, especially when trying to close that achievement gap?
Yeah, well, I would say that this is a historical referendum. So, I mean, to some extent, you can agree with, with leaders in the community that have said, we've done all these initiatives, and what has been the outcome. But the reality is that the financial investment hasn't truly been there. And so this is the first time that we're really seeing a strong push. And again, it's coming from the community. And these are investments that are not just for 1 to 2 years. I mean, this is an investment into our future. And now is the right time. At some point, we're going to have to make an investment into our schools and into our kids. The question is, it now, when we have an opportunity with like low interest rates, we have an opportunity to really leverage the timing to even though it's a financial impact, but it will create great results and great outcomes for the future, versus waiting and then having that cost be even higher. So so there's a little bit of business sense in there, in the fact that the investment has to be made at some point, but I think now is the right time to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. At some point, to invest in our babies, as I said. Like I always, and I believe this, that you can tell the health of a community by how well their kids are doing, how well their children are doing. I believe that strongly. Alderwoman, you were going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, I also think that the community has asked for transparency. And by asking for transparency, they will always hold us accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's go back to the best high school in the city, please, Madison East High School. And I just want to talk about, let's just focus on East, because East is the best. Let's just focus on that school, please. Let's not even worry about anyone else. So how is this going to help my school, East, old school? This passes, I know what you guys want, $70 million for each school or something like that, high school. East probably deserves $150 million, but that's fine. That's fine. So $70 million. How is East going to look different if this passes? What will be the difference in East, you think? How the look and feels, and just the impact on East High School? Y'all should have been jumping to answer this question. This should have been.
Well, I've been to East High School, and I can definitely say that nothing like having, we just talked about some of these other schools, Verona and Wanakee, that are just, the aesthetics do make a difference, I believe, to an education. And there's nothing like having an environment that is welcoming, that you feel is yours. And I think that's, our students deserve that. Our students deserve to be in a place where they can be engaged, and they can just, they can really feel like it belongs to them, and that they feel like they have, they're up to par, as some of these other schools. So, it's we can give this to them. So, but I do definitely think that the environment plays a big role in the students' engagement in academics. And the reality is, our schools have, besides academics, sports, arts, and music, there's just a lot of investments to an environment that will allow some of these other activities to continue engaging our students.
Yeah.
And I also think that we have to realize that our children have friends in other school districts, and here's about what they have compared to what we have. And I think that when you look at East High School, for example,
That's a great example. That's
which
a
is
great
a
example.
great school, by the way. I think when you look at East High School, I mean, you can go through there and just start making a long list of what needs to be improved. But I think that we need to really, as I said before, this is just the time to really do that heavy lifting, large investment in our schools. All four of our schools are aging rapidly.
Yeah, that's true. And I was joking, but East is a perfect example. East is really aging. It's a lot of stuff is old. So you could really, East is actually a perfect example of use a real upgrade internally. So before I go, I want two more questions for you. one, yes, I was talking about the building and what we can do to make the buildings nice or whatever. But also, I think what can we do internally? So, does this impact like teachers of color? Like, does this help us try to get more teachers of color in the schools? Like, my diversity in the schools. Like, does this funding impact the holistic thing of I get the building. I do. I appreciate the building. I think that's important. But also, what's important, what's going on internally, like the teachers, what they teach, how they teach. But part of that is just having the right teachers who understand how to teach our kids and look like our kids. I grew up in Madison, and I think I had three teachers who looked like me through my whole school. So I got to East, and like Milton Pike and Richard Scott and others. Other than that, so I haven't never had a lot of teachers who look like me. And then I go to college, I have more teachers look like me. So there's an impact. So does this impact that part of the dynamic in the schools?
I think it does. And I think it also will attract more teachers of color because there's going to be more resources there. And I think that is one of the things that is lacking right now is when you look at the resources that's available, not so much want to teach in that environment, right? Especially when you talk about recent grads.
Right. What about you, Sandy? Do you want to answer this question too?
Yeah, when I think about the fact that we have a pretty prestigious school of education in our own backyard, and to think about like how do we get, how do we recruit more teachers of color that are either going into our own school of education or that come from other parts of the country. At the end of the day, we're recruiting a workforce to our schools. And so we are not only are we recruiting teachers that look like our students, that build curriculum focused around our students' culture and background as well, and that can really connect with our students and engage with our students, but we're also recruiting a workforce that's going to live here and spend money here in Madison. So again, I think it's a win-win situation for our kids, but also, for the rest of our community and our economy.
Okay, last question. This is an important question, right? So this is the question for the people who are in Madison who are not sold on the referendum, but on the fence, and they need pushing, right? They need pushing. And why do I spend dollars? Maybe my kids are gone out of school anymore. Maybe they're not in school anymore, right? Maybe I'm looking at retirement. Maybe my kids go to a private school, whatever that is, that they're not sold on why this is needed and why they should support this referendum. What would you say to these people to convince those people who are kind of in the middle, who are just trying to figure out, I'm not sure, I'm not sold on this? What do you say? What's your push for them?
Well, my push for them is that I think that we have never, ever have done a push for really upgrading and investing in all of our schools. So we're not just saying let's do La Follette, right? We're saying let's bring everything up to date. You might be going into retirement, but your grandchildren are going into the schools. So, I mean, it affects all of us, whether we have children in the school system or whether we have grandchildren in the school system. I think it affects all of us, and it absolutely affects our workforce. Remember that workforce always has to be replenished, and we have to really look at preparing people for that. And in this case, it's the students, of course.
Yeah, and definitely want to add to that. I think Madison, we're a very giving community. As a nonprofit, I see that we're a very giving community, and so when you look at the opportunity here of investing in our future, I think that just aligns well with folks who are who want to make sure that our entire community thrives. The other thing I definitely look at is we're so proud of the community we have. We love our lakes, we love our state capitol, we love our university, we love all these things that make us great. But a lot of that is driven by the people. And, if we want to continue having a thriving community, then we need to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to take advantage of all these resources that we have and continue building upon them, and continue building the reputation that Madison has for being such a great place to live. Well, let's make sure it's a great place to live, and that our students and kids can get an education that they deserve and that we can leverage in the future, as Sheri mentioned, with a growing workforce. So, I want to make sure that our kids that are being educated here, that stay here and invest in our city when they graduate high school and go on to college, and whether they stay here or come back here. I want them to make sure that investment definitely comes back to our community.
Well, look, they should be happy they have two wonderful women like you advocating for this referendum. Like the passion, I'm impressed. Like I think that, no, I am sincerely, because I think the time of Madison, the achievement gaps, all this stuff's been going on in Madison for decades, and there's strong arguments to be like, why do anything why give money back if the schools are not putting back out and helping us. But I think you guys have laid out really good arguments on why this does impact future generations, this does impact the community, this does impact workforce, and I think when you mentioned earlier, Alderwoman Carter, about the arts, I think that's important. So I think that's a strong argument, and I also think it's a strong argument that what's going on? I mean, Wanakee Prairie now, percentage-wise, has more black people than Madison, right? So Fitchburg has those schools have really nice schools. I mean, they just do. So that's just the reality. If Madison wants to compete, they want to compete from a workforce, they want to compete from education K through 12, you got to step up and pay for it, right? So I thank you for your time, both of you. This is wonderful, and I will actually both of you back here on one-on-one, especially you, boss, Alderwoman and Council President. Especially you. I see took my eye on her, especially you. Yeah.
I see that. I see those eyes.
Thank you for your time, both of you. I wish you both have a great week, and thank you for joining us again on Real Talk.
This is 365 Media.